All right, everybody, we're about to get started. Go ahead and settle into your seats. We have an intro to get through, so I'm gonna do that. Well, welcome to Politifest2025 Solution Showdown. We're so happy to have you here to watch all of these nerds fight. Hopefully they'll make it entertaining and informative for us. We're trying our very best. In case you're not familiar with Voice of San Diego, I hope you are because you're here, but we are a nonprofit investigative news organization. And as a nonprofit, we depend on members and donors and sponsors and lovely people who attend our events like you to make our work possible. So thank you so much for your support. I would like to take a minute to recognize our sponsors who helped make this event possible today. A special thanks to the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of San Diego for being our partner for 8 years now on the most beautiful campus in the nation, no less. Amazing. Also thanks to the Sequan Band of the Kumeyaay Nation, Mark Nelson and the Nelson Stakeholder Consulting, the San Diego Foundation, Hitsky Development, Intessa, the Prebis Foundation, Verse 5 San Diego, and AARP. What a lovely list of sponsors. We'd also like to recognize KPBS and iNewsSource, our partners at Public Matters. We're partnering to share content, conversation, and events like this to ensure you all understand how to get involved civically and have the information you need to do that, to participate in the democratic process. I want to give a special thanks to Hitsky Development and Intessa for sponsoring this session, and I'd like to invite Ginger here to say a few words before we begin.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ginger Hitsky, and I am the Hitsky of Hitsky Development. This is it right here. And I'm very, very happy to be sponsoring this discussion. I do know all these gentlemen. These are all some really smart guys. I'm really interested to see if they can impress me today and what to do to make housing more affordable in San Diego. I also just want to say I'm really grateful to be able to sponsor free press in this particular year of our life, folks. So donate, please, to the Voice of San Diego. Thank you.
We also have a multimedia component for you all from our partners at Intessa. We're going to get to that in a second. It is unclear to me how to get this to start. Does anybody know anything about this? Oh, right. Okay, that's a keyword.
Usually it starts with a gut check. When I think about the people who call us, someone has said to them, call Intessa. Intessa can be trusted. So when people engage with Intessa, they know they are getting intentional, thoughtful, candid, and real strategy in relationships. How we are different is this thread of confidence building. We don't say, hey, come hire a PR firm. We say, what is your business goal? What's the problem you're trying to solve? What are you lacking confidence in? And how can we build you up? I hesitate to describe us as a public relations firm or a communications firm because we're so much more than that.
We are also dot connectors, whether it's through or with government, whether it's with our partners or our clients, or even here at Intessa with our own team, we are constantly connecting dots. And if you believe in your mission, and we believe in your mission, we can help you communicate that.
What I know about San Diegans is they're drawn to positive energy. They're drawn to big, bold ideas. If you're in the Intessa network, there are a bunch of other leaders and companies who share your values. It's just how we naturally show up. We do work we're really proud of every step of the way.
We're advocates. We're advocates for our clients. We're advocates for the people they serve. Like, we're advocates for San Diego.
We love Intessa. They're fantastic partners. Let's not look at this. It's not necessary. Okay. And so throughout the event today, we encourage you to submit questions through the Slido app. You can scan this QR code here to access the app. You'll also be able to vote throughout, but especially, hopefully you wait till the end of the session to vote and be informed, but I guess that's your prerogative. And if you have an issue with the app at any point, go ahead and raise your hand. One of our lovely volunteers will come around and help you with that. You can also tweet along with this session if you use Twitter with the hashtag Politifest2025 or Instagram, my preferred social media app, but that's also your call. Now, I've talked enough. I'm going to hand this over to our North County reporter, Tigist Layne.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to the Housing Solutions Showdown. My name is Tigist Layne, and I'm the North County reporter at Voice of San Diego. Today, we're going to attempt to answer one big question, which is, how can we build more housing in San Diego that people can actually afford? This is my third year at Politifest, where I've moderated panels about housing. Just can't get enough, I guess. But this year is different. We're not just going to talk about the challenges, and there are many. We're here to focus on ideas and possible solutions to the housing crisis. And let's be clear, California has a severe housing shortage. It's pushing people out of their neighborhoods and driving up the cost of living. Families are paying more than they can afford, and younger generations are being priced out. Neighborhoods across the region are changing before our eyes. And part of the problem is building housing that's affordable is complicated. There's high construction costs, long approval processes, state mandates, local pushback, supply chain problems, and much more that can all get in the way. That's why today's panel is exciting. Instead of just talking about the problems, we're going to hear from people who want to solve it. Today, you'll hear 3 different proposals or solutions, each coming at the problem from a unique angle. Before we dive in, let me introduce our panelists. We have Ricardo Flores, who is the executive director of the nonprofit Local Initiative Support Corporation, or LISC San Diego, where he oversees financing for affordable housing and investments in underserved neighborhoods across the city. He previously served as chief of staff to Councilmember Marty Emerald and as an aide to Congresswoman Susan Davis. Let's give it up for Ricardo Flores. Next to him, we have Sean Kilkenny, who is a founding partner of Nolen Communities, a North County-based developer that has built more than 600 housing units, including 90 affordable units in projects ranging from the Fox Point Farms in Encinitas to smaller developments in Cardiff. His background also includes work in environmental consulting. Please give it up for Sean Kilkenny. And last but not least, we have Stephen Russell, who is the executive director of the San Diego Housing Federation, a coalition that advocates for affordable housing and supports the groups that build it. He also serves on several statewide housing boards, and he has more than 2 decades of experience in community and economic development. Let's hear it for Stephen Russell. So we have 3 experts from different backgrounds, nonprofit, development, and policy, each with a bold idea to present to you, and in the end, you get to vote for your favorite one, the one that you think could actually work. So let's get started. Ricardo, you will do our first presentation. Yes, you can come up here, you'll have the clicker, and I'll give you 10 minutes. Let's see here.
Well, thank you, Tigist, and thank you, Voice of San Diego, for inviting me back, this time with a solution. So I'm happy to be here. Again, my name is Ricardo Flores. I'm the executive director of LISC San Diego. We are essentially a nonprofit bank that provides funding for affordable housing, credit union, similarly. And our money actually comes from banks because of their large obligations under the Community Reinvestment Act. So. The solution here, lowering housing prices by increasing property rights for single-family homeowners. Sounds like magic. Sounds like nobody loses there, right? And in housing, it seems like somebody's losing. But let's see how we can do that if that's possible. So this is where we're at. This is a map of the city of San Diego, and the reddish, pinkish color is 81% of the residential land of the city of San Diego is zoned for one thing and one thing only: a minimum of a 5,000 square foot home, or minimum of 5,000 square foot lot and a home on top of it, right? And the rest of the city, about 15%, is multifamily. This image is why we are in a housing crisis. If you're reserving most of your land and forcing people either to buy or rent 5,000 square feet of land, that's a problem, right? It's not a problem if there's nobody here, if the city's smaller, but it's a problem because the city's large and people want to live here. So let's step back a second and let's say, well, where did this zoning come from? How did this come about? Because it's not ordained by a higher power. No, it was ordained by this man, Duncan McDuffie, a developer in Berkeley, California. McDuffie had a project called Claremont that still exists to this day. Beautiful neighborhood, still very homogeneous, but a beautiful community. And McDuffie had a problem. McDuffie's problem was that the neighboring community, the deeds, the restrictive deed covenants that would keep out people of color, was expiring. And McDuffie didn't want that because it would have affected his property values, so he believed. And so McDuffie convinced the Berkeley City Council to put together a commission to do something about this. And they went around all the United States and they looked for zoning that could help them. Now remember, in the early 1900s, there wasn't a whole lot of zoning in our country. Zoning is a relatively new phenomenon, to be honest with you, right? And so McDuffie actually found something in Minneapolis. He found a law that forced people to build a duplex on one piece of land. And McDuffie said, well, just take out the duplex and put one home. Bingo, single-family zoning was born, and it was first passed at the city of Berkeley in 1916. 1916. Our city, not to be outdone, in 1923 we passed single-family zoning. And when we passed it, the council wasn't exactly sure what it was doing, so it actually added this little clause, not that this zoning, this new zoning, would not interfere or abrogate or annul any easement or covenant between parties. So they wanted to make sure that whatever happens with this new idea of zoning from Berkeley, those deed covenants are still in place, folks, right? 100 years. When we passed this law at the city of San Diego, we were about 75,000 people. Here we are 1.4 million people, and we still have this zoning, right? And so let's stop for a second. How big is 5,000 square feet? Because the human mind has a hard time understanding size, distance, right? Well, 5,000 square feet is actually the size of a basketball court. That's the size of a basketball court. So think about that. Next time you go to a basketball court, look at the land and look at the size and go, this is what I'm being forced to buy in the city of San Diego, a minimum of this. In fact, we found it's actually the city of San Diego, they're larger lots than this. Most of them are actually larger than this. So the question is, what can we do about this? How can we solve this problem? Very simple. Subdivide the land. Allow people to buy less land and to build a home. Or in this case, if you're from the East Coast, a townhome, right? If you buy 1,000 square feet of land instead of 5,000 square feet of land, guess what? You've just created middle-income housing. Why? Because I'm not going to pay the same price for 5,000 square feet as I would for 1,000 square feet, right? And so what does this look like? Here's an example. These are about 4 stories, but why 4 stories? Because parking, the garage, right? Wrong or right, people, when they buy a home, if you buy a home without parking, it's going to be tough to sell the home without parking. People want to maximize their profit. So parking would be the first floor. And then you have additional floors. Let's see what they look like. Oops. Okay, there. So this would be your second story, right? This would be your family area. This would be your third story, which is where your kids or your family would live. And then your primary. This home is not 1,000 square feet of an ADU in the backyard. This is a 2,000 square foot home. It's just configured differently. It's configured without a front yard and a backyard. So the question is, okay, fine, we can build it. Okay, what's the cost of that little townhome? And mind you, these townhomes don't have an HOA. They are what we call fee simple. All single-family homes are fee simple, meaning there's enough space between the walls that you don't need an HOA. Because an HOA can be challenging for folks, especially if you're trying to buy a house in a very expensive market. So we asked London Motor Advisors, Gary London, who many of you may know, and he's always on the Econometer and always talking about different things. And Gary's little joke to me is that he helped plan all the ranchos in our community, right? And Gary says, I'm out of the rancho business because there's no more land. So what did Gary tell us? Gary said, okay, let me do put pen to paper, and bingo, it would be 42% cheaper on average. In fact, if you go to a higher income neighborhood like La Jolla, the drop is greater. It's 60% less. Point Loma, it's 50% less. It makes sense. The values are so high that when you force people to buy less land, the drop is greater. 42% cheaper. That's a significant drop. For what? Just saying you can do different things with the land? Then the next question we asked, because as was mentioned, I work for elected officials, I work for the city. So what would happen to the city? What would happen to our property tax base? Because that's very, very important that we don't disrupt that property tax base, right? That's very important. So we asked that same question of Gary, and this blew my mind. If the city of San Diego allowed just 4,000 of those townhomes to replace a single-family home, just 4,000. For context, there are 280,000 single-family lots in the city of San Diego. So that's 1.4% of all the single-family homes. The city would receive an additional $430 million in property taxes in perpetuity, right? Because once you make developable land, somebody's paying for it. If you lose the house, the bank pays for it. Now this is just the city. If you look at your tax bill, you realize the city only collects 18 cents of every dollar. The county collects 20. So the county would get about $450 million. And the school district, my goodness, the school district collects 45 cents of every dollar. They would get probably over $800 million in new property taxes. Again, for context, the city of San Diego collects every year $758 million of property taxes. And we would be adding another $430 million. That's significant, folks. There's your infrastructure, there's your streets, there's your roads, there's your parks, there's everything you've been asking for, right? And then lastly, because my parents are boomers, and I know there's a lot of resistance, but my goal is not to destroy my parents' property values. Why? Because it's counterintuitive to me. If I destroy their property values, that's going to affect me, isn't it? So what happens to them? Well, this isn't really the law of land, but it is pretty much common sense if you work in the industry of land and developing.
1 minute.
Not all land is equal. If you own a piece of land over the Pacific Ocean and you can't do anything with it, it has no value. If you can build one home, it has one value. If you can build condos, it has another value. By increasing your property rights, which this is what doing, because you're allowed to subdivide, you are increasing the overall property value. And bingo, it's done. You have now heard the big secret that to solve our problem is actually beneath our own feet. Allow the land to be subdivided ministerially. Doesn't mean you have to do it. Doesn't mean you want to do it. But allow it to happen. Allow it to happen. That's all we're asking. This is our coalition. We've got a big coalition. And that's my information. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, Stephen, we hear from you next. Is that all right? The clicker should be up there. You can just click the next slide.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stephen Russell. I'm president and CEO of the San Diego Housing Federation. And let me learn where this clicker is. We have a vision where everybody in San Diego County has an affordable and safe place to call home. And I will say, first of all, standing up here, I'm not speaking, the affordable housing sector is providing an emergency service in the middle of an absolute crisis. That's not what I'm here to talk about. We have to continue to fund housing that is available to families who are being displaced by current economic activity. But what I want to do is lay the groundwork for why we have this crisis, suggest a solution, and I'll have to say the Venn diagram between me and Ricardo is pretty healthy, so you may have to award 2 trophies today, I'm just telling you right now. So first of all, why do we have a crisis? Why are rents going up? And the fact of the matter is we have a shortfall of affordable homes here in the region. And the most important slide, I'm going to go skip right to, this is naturally occurring affordable housing. This is housing that just rents for a low price because of its location, its quality, a number of factors, the mortgage is paid off. All of these reasons may lead to housing that is simply inexpensive. And historically, if any of you have lived here for more than 20 years, you'll remember when North Park was the largest reservoir of naturally affordable housing in the region. City Heights, well, actually maybe City Heights was #1 just in sheer numbers. But we had natural places where folks could afford to live because simply the market price was no higher than that. That's what we call naturally occurring affordable housing. When you look at this chart here from 2000 to 2000, projecting forward to 2040, the year 2000, we had 90,000 homes that were just naturally affordable to low-income residents, people, 50% AMI. Flash forward 10 years, we're down by 30,000. Flash forward another decade to 2020, we're down to less than 30,000 total. This is a net loss of housing that is available to folks, but it is not a loss of actual housing. If you notice, the higher income stuff, the orange band, is growing each time. What that means is that housing is shifting from being affordable. The same structure 10 years later is no longer affordable to folks. And it's not from destruction of housing. This chart is to show you that when you look at the number of multifamily units demolished, this is production versus demolition, can you even see the orange on the lower? Just below the line, there's a little bit of tiny little orange fringe underneath that represents the number of units demolished. It is not the demolition of housing that's caused us to lose this natural affordable. It is, in fact, the conversion, the up-marketing of that housing. This chart tells many things. It explains why we have this crisis. And the first thing to note is this is simple housing production from the year 2000 to 2023. And you can see we had a huge dip during the recession. We slowly come up. We're bouncing a little bit. And 2024 would look almost as good as 2023 if it were on this chart. Not quite as good. We just had the cities report. Actually, all the county municipalities have reported their numbers. But if you notice, it dipped and it rose. The second thing to take away from this, though, is the proportion of multifamily to single family. If you notice, before the recession, the majority of housing built was single family. This is in the whole region. It drops to almost no production in the years 2009, 2010, and when it rebounds, the proportion of housing that is single family is much smaller, that the vast majority of new housing units are in fact multifamily. And that the reason for that was alluded to earlier. If we have a 135,000 unit deficit in this region, it would take us 5 Mira Mesas if we were to meet that using that particular development model of single family homes. It would take 5 Mira Mesas. And as a graduate of Mira Mesa High, I say, I don't really want 1 Mira Mesa, much less 5 more of them here in the county. It's a painful place to live if you're a suburban kid without a car, quite frankly, okay? So, but 5 more Mira Mesas if we build single-family homes. So that is clearly not the answer. We have major constraints of the border, the mountains, the ocean, and Camp Pendleton that prevent us from simply doing these single-family home neighborhoods. So the third thing to take away is the green dotted line, which is the average of households that were formed each of those years. And that's about 16,000 new households. The formation was, so that's demand, if you will, for new housing. And we have not met the actual demand in any given year since 2004. And that's a cumulative deficit. It's not one time, then next year we get to wipe the books clean. That's how we got to over 130,000 units short in the region, is by not building repeatedly year after year. So we need to build more. We need a lot more new housing, and we need opportunities for folks to buy into the region. We're not going to be able to do it with single-family homes, and this is where Ricardo and I kind of, I won't say collide, where we merge into a stream here. But talking about, really briefly, home ownership. Rentership is an unstable status. So home ownership is not just a way of building wealth. Very significantly, it's a way of stabilizing your living costs over the rest of your life, right? So you know you can continue to live in the community you served. If you have a mortgage, you can project that in 20, 30 years, that mortgage is going to be the same. Taxes go up, insurance goes up, but your fundamental living expense won't change. This chart shows you whereas black families are 32% of homeowners, 32% of them are homeowners and 68% renters. The reverse is true for white households. What that means is that black households are exposed to the vagaries of the market at a much higher rate, and it forces them to move. It forces folks to double up, triple up, or leave the region or go homeless, right? So this is the explanation of that. The history of that, how many of you know this image? Just show me a hand. You know this image. I'm not going to talk about it. You should ask your friends about it. If you don't know what that means, ask the person sitting next to you with their hand up. So, what is the solution? The solution is we need to find ways of building more multifamily, affordable housing for sale. There's a number of ways of doing it, and there's several components. Townhomes, which are actually connected but might be condos, are one. Row homes, which have zero lot line separation, so they're actually individual lots, and they don't share an HOA. To get there, we need more condos, traditional condos in high density. Now, one of the reasons why this is an affordable solution is 2-story, slab on grade, 3-story, 4-story, timber on grade is the cheapest form of construction we've got. The density that we're building in our mid-city area and downtown is by nature, it's concrete or mass timber or other things that are very expensive to build, and they're always going to be that. So we need to be able to build and increase the supply of this 2- and 3-story, maybe 4-story in some cases, row homes, townhomes. And we need to be able to do a condominium without fear of the construction defect litigation shutting it down. Right now, we need to reform the laws around construction defect litigation to allow lenders to take the risk, to allow builders to take the risk to actually build condominiums. We need to reform the insurance sector, and we need to rezone. This is where the Venn diagram gets really overlapping. Rezone areas no higher than a townhome density. What we've done in mid-city area with complete communities is going to result in a massive amount of housing. It already has, but that housing is fundamentally going to be more expensive. And the land, if you zone to that level, is never going to develop at a 2-, 3-, and 4-story level, right? We had an era of row homes in North Park. That was before complete communities came in and raised the potential of the land. There's no longer possible to economically build those same 6 units on a single family lot anymore. If you have that land, you're going to max it out and you're going to get 40 or 60 units on that land if you possibly get your hands on it. So we need to find areas like Western Chula Vista, like Claremont, like other communities in San Diego, and zone those areas so they can support the row homes and townhomes. And then we need to reform construction defect litigation so the condominiums can emerge as a natural market. If we can create, and this is the tagline, 10,000 ownership units a year, 10,000 new ownership units a year for 10 years, we will be on the other side of this crisis. We'll have a balanced and healthy and growing marketplace. That's the sum total of the idea. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you vote for me with a rainbow. Thank you.
All right, I'm not as seasoned as these guys, so excuse me if I look at my notes here. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sean Kilkenny. First, I want to start by thanking the Voice of San Diego for this forum, HITSC and Intesa for the sponsorship, and for USD for hosting today. You know, it's appropriate that we're here on a college campus. It's early October, which means that we just went through back to school with our sons, Logan and Owen. And I think a lot of you see something like this when you're going by a school these days, these overstuffed backpacks. These kids, they have their computers and their notebooks and their books, and they have extracurriculars and they have sports. It's common to see this. And at the end of the year, these backpacks are in tatters and kids are exhausted. Much like these overstuffed backpacks, housing projects are overly burdened. Even though 80% of the homes that are going to be built in San Diego exist today, new housing is expected to solve existing deficiencies, things like vehicle miles traveled, water quality, energy usage, greenhouse gas emissions, roadways, water supply, parks, schools, and others. And as a result, new homes take years to secure approvals and are more expensive. What this has done is it's created a framework and the associated regulatory process that has caused a severe undersupply of housing over the last 40 years. You've heard us say it already. What that has done is it turns homes into commodities that are way too expensive, available only to the wealthiest or luckiest few, has resulted in a loss of business, a loss of employment, a loss of opportunities to create generational wealth, and frankly, a loss of congressional power in California to affect national change. So bear with me, because over the next couple of minutes, we're going to go on a journey together, and you're going to feel some different feels, as my kids would say. And that's okay. Housing is a really emotional topic. But let's ride this out. That's why I want to thank you for being here and engaging on such an important issue. I agree with many of the things that we've heard already. I think we need many, many solutions. We need to look at lot sizes. We need more funding for housing. But I also think that we need to look at this with an abundance mindset. Why do we need to think bigger? Well, first, let's start with the scale of the problem that you've heard already. We are 200,000 housing units short today due to 40 years of undersupply. That's just to catch up to today. That doesn't account for an additional 200,000 units of housing that we'll need over the next 20 years. The same thing is happening across the entire state. The problem of housing supply is only getting worse. Costs continue to go up, regulations continue to get increased, and affordability is what pays the price. It's kind of like my doctor told me the best time to start working out was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. So how can we start to unwind the mess that we've created for ourselves? Well, big problems require big solutions. And that's why I'm proposing that we have the governor declare a statewide housing emergency. Now, what would this emergency do? The emergency declaration would allow for any residential development that proposes a general plan and zoning consistent project to be approved administratively. Why else do we have general plans and zoning laws if we're not going to use them? This proposal doesn't allow for general plan amendments, and it wouldn't create a pathway for rezones. It would allow us to build what we have planned today. Are you guys with me? Everyone feeling okay? I promise it's not that crazy, and here's why. The reality is that we have a lot more planned housing across the region in general plans and community plans. How many homes? Well, according to Sandag, we have 250,000 more homes planned for than under build-out of the 2025 regional plan. They're simply not being developed. And why is that? Long permitting processes with unacceptable levels of entitlement risk, uncertainty over political outcomes, lack of availability of land, as you continue to hear, a lack of diversity of home types built to suit the market, high costs of capital, high regulatory environment, just to name a few. Now, the state is already moving in this direction. A litany of annual legislative changes that are pecking around the edges, but these tweaks have yet to have an appreciable impact on the supply of housing. We literally cannot afford to keep waiting. Nibbling around the edges isn't going to cut the scale, isn't going to cut it. The scale of the problem is just far too great. Even in areas where local and state law have prioritized and streamlined the development process, we continue to fall further and further behind. So being more permissive across the state and the region with an abundance mindset, but still within the time and the expense and the energy and all the feedback that has gone into the community plans and the zoning and the general plans that you all have been engaged in, would provide for a wider scale of land and opportunities upon which to build a larger number and variety of homes. In fact, the city of San Diego has been a leader through Complete Communities Housing Solutions. And according to a 2005 KPBS study, the jurisdictions in San Diego, which saw the most building permits issued between 2018 and 2024, saw the lowest increases in rent. Supply and demand. We must fix the supply side. Again, you heard Stephen just mention this, but state law, well, again, has just been passed with AB 130, still isn't permissive enough because it prioritizes high-density infill development in areas that are already largely developed with projects that are inherently more expensive to build. Podium, high cost of construction projects, and projects that are by and large only going to be rental projects and not provide the opportunity for home ownership that is so sorely missing. So how does this emergency declaration work? Well, it can't be done overnight, unfortunately, but it can be done within 2 years to give ourselves some runway to go ahead and have local jurisdictions update infrastructure plans, coordinate with utility districts, work with property owners and applicants, a chance to staff up, a chance for labor markets to hire enough laborers to do this. We're incredibly short on the labor side right now to build what we need to build in San Diego. It would also allow capital and equity markets a chance to evaluate opportunities and to be ready once the green light was lit. This program would then last for 7 years, consistent with the 7th Regional Housing Needs Allocation Arena cycle, which would begin in 2027, 2028, 2029, and it would last for 7 years. And at that point in time, the governor, at the governor's sole discretion, could either end the program or continue it on with the ultimate goal of producing 3 million new units statewide. Any approval would be vested for a 3-year period, but if a project hadn't substantially started, it would have to go back to the line and reapply all over again. So I recognize that this is a pretty significant proposal and there needs to be some guardrails to make sure that there are no bad actors. Communities would have to meet the following requirements. They would have to be consistent with general plan and zoning. At least 10% of the units would have to be deed restricted as low income or 20% at moderate income. Homes would have to be reviewed for life and safety by the fire department. They would have to demonstrate sufficient water, sewer, storm drain, and utility capacity. Communities would have to achieve a minimum of at least 8 units per acre. All regulatory permitting, federal and state, would still be required. You couldn't bypass permitting processes. And applicable mitigation measures from a general plan would apply. Everyone's starting to breathe a little bit better? You see, it's not just because it's so expensive, but the reality is California is perhaps the most environmentally progressive state in the US. We have the 3rd lowest greenhouse gas emissions per capita per nominal unit of output of any state in the US. Every clean, green, energy efficient, EV-ready, fire-safe house built in California is one step towards a better environment. And this proposal doesn't change anything about the world-class building codes in California. But more importantly, it's about our future. People and businesses are leaving California. They're going to places like Texas and Arizona and Nevada. And when people leave, businesses leave. And we've seen this in San Diego. In fact, San Diegans, in their latest projection under the regional plan, is estimating that our future build-out of employment will be 290,000 fewer jobs than just 4 years ago. How does that affect your children? How will that affect your grandchildren? This is why I believe the governor declaring a state of emergency on housing to direct general plan and compliant projects to be approved administratively is the best solution to build more homes that will be affordable to more in San Diego. Thank you very much for hanging with me.
Thank you all for those wonderful presentations. So now we're just going to have a little discussion about what we've heard. Stephen, I want to start with you. Can you explain a little bit this reforming construction defect litigation?
Yes. So right now, in the relationship, there's laws regarding construction defects that are between the primary party who hired a contractor and the body, and then the contractor themselves. And with HOA law as it stands right now, the HOA is like the agent for all of the owners. And there's a 10-year clock on any construction defect in the building. So what happens in practice is, at the end of 10 years, every building is going to have some cracks. It's going to have some water leakage somewhere. The challenge is that the HOA is under legal obligation. If a number of its members are starting to cite problems with the building, and the HOA doesn't act by suing the developer, they themselves, the HOA, could be on the hook and could be the responsible party. So that's an unbearable burden on their part. In terms of the construction defects themselves, there's a whole industry of lawyers who go out there who clock these things. And they know when year 9 comes up, and they're ready to start organizing their HOA members, probably year 8 and a half. So they're ready to move forward, and so much so that condo builders have to put aside reserves, either anticipation of this event 10 years from now, or self-insurance some other ways, which is effectively putting aside the reserves, but in other liquid investments. Well, clearly, that's capital that's tied up. It's a disincentive for folks to actually go into the business of building these things. And banks don't want to lend on something where they could lose the value of the assets. All of these things are severely constraining the development of new condos. And we need to either shorten the term or narrow the types of defects that are eligible, or in some way reform construction defect litigation so it has a much narrower footprint if we're going to see more condominiums developed.
Yes, that answers my question. And that specifically applies to condos and not single-family homes?
That's correct. And also, so this is this distinction between row homes as well. Row homes don't have shared property. They may share the driveway and shared ownership, but the maintenance and liability on asphalt is effectively nil. But by building row homes where you have actually a separation between the buildings, you have lot lines that are you have individual. Each thing is fee simple. Each building is fee simple. Condominiums, you have a lot of common ownership. We also haven't addressed, there could be other options with limited equity cooperatives and other kinds of forms of housing I didn't go into. But in terms of the condo, yes, the construction defect litigation is unique to the condominium structure.
And one more follow-up with that. You mentioned that could make the way for 10,000 new homes. Is that correct?
There is such demand built up. When you see what young people in particular are paying in rents, if you could translate a $4,000, $5,000 rent into a mortgage instead, it would be steep when they're getting into it, right? But as each year, inflation would make that seem cheaper. And so the calculated decision that folks make as to where do I live, what do I rent or buy, it would change significantly. I think that we're approaching 10,000 units in the county right now, 10,000 total units right now. The single family, I'm sorry, with state law as it is, we're not going to be able to build in the backcountry. We're not going to be able to get single family homes at the number we need. We really do need multifamily, either condos or row homes or townhomes, which are kind of a form of condo, in order for this to work. And again, I asked did I get back to your question? Okay. I enjoy this subject matter, and so I can keep talking well past the question.
Sean, I saw you nodding your head when Stephen said we're not going to be able to build as much as we want in the backcountry. Can you explain why you had that reaction to that?
Yeah, so a couple of reasons. The first of which is the unincorporated area in their last general plan update, the Board of Supervisors made a very strategic decision to move most new development in the unincorporated county into towns and villages under what they called their population distribution strategy. And it was informed by AB 32, the Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006, and then SB 375, which wanted to link transportation planning with greenhouse gas reductions. And the county said, we can't meet our goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions if we continue to allow development far off in unincorporated county areas. So they pushed more density into the village areas of Ramona and Fallbrook and Alpine, and they took away a lot of development in more outlying exurban areas outside of kind of the Counter Water Authority line. So subsequently, SB 743 passed, which makes VMT the #1 consideration under CEQA analysis, and that's another hindrance to building projects, frankly, almost anywhere along the unincorporated area or many portions of San Diego, inland along the 15 corridor or kind of coastal North County. So we just won't see it. Fire insurance is another issue that causes significant challenges with building in the backcountry. It's just nearly impossible to get fire insurance right now.
So your solution, Sean, would focus on infill development, is that correct?
So most of the general plans and community plans that have been updated over the last 2 decades have really focused on infill as the solution. What you've seen in San Diego with updates to the community plans in Claremont, Kearny Mesa, they're all focused on building more complete communities within existing developed areas. We also have a multiple species conservation plan, which protects most of South County of San Diego, as well as the city of San Diego. We have MSCP plans in draft form or somewhat adopted status across the rest of North County as well. And so the reality is most of our general plans and community plans are focusing development on infill areas. There isn't a much opportunity to build in more outlying areas.
Ricardo, I want to come to you. Does your solution factor in possibly building not infill, or does it focus on existing single-family zoning?
Yeah, it's more of an infill play. That's really the goal because, again, the majority of the housing, the single-family housing in the city is in the urban core. And then, of course, long-term, we know the Colorado River is challenging. We know that it costs more money to provide more services further away, et cetera. And we really do need to concentrate that. And let alone, too, everybody wants to live in a walkable community, or most people do, right? Now, this doesn't negate if you want to live in Alpine or you want to live in Humboldt and you find a home, that's your prerogative. But I think what we're also seeing, too, is governments are starting to say, we can't ensure reliability. My parents live in Humboldt. When there was a fire years ago, the county said, look, you guys better get solar because we can't ensure that you're going to have the lights on. So they got solar. They have a septic tank, right? These are the decisions they make. The challenge for them, though, is they're sitting on an acre of land in a 2,500 square foot home, and they're in their 80s. And my dad has to take his car, the trash down the road to drive it. That's unsustainable, right? And so, again, You can build out there if you want, or you can live out there if you want to, but the idea that the government is going to subsidize all of that for you, that's just not practical. Maybe it will be at one point, but not as we sit here today.
Ricardo, with your solution, you know, minimum lot sizes, subdividing land, what do you expect that there would be pushback from people who, you know, they own their home, they own the land that it's sitting on? Why would they want to give some of that away?
Yeah, you know, it's an interesting question because in some ways I'm telling folks, I'm going to give you more rights, right? Like I'm not only going to give you pizza, I'm going to give you hot dogs. And people are saying, I don't want hot dogs. I don't want hot dogs. I don't eat hot dogs. And you're saying you don't have to eat the hot dog if you want to, but you can eat the pizza. I'm giving you more rights. That's the crucial part. The other part too is, you know, we have an aging population that at some point could be house rich, cash poor. House rich, cash poor. So what do? The only thing on the market that you can do is enter into a reverse mortgage. My parents are not going to enter into a reverse mortgage because they want to give me and my sister something. And that something is the house, right? And so in this scenario, the front yard, I have a huge front yard. That front yard has worth. If your home is worth $1 million, your front yard's worth about $200,000, right? And in reality, you don't have to sell it to a stranger. You sell it to your own kid, right? Sell it to your kid, and you take the cash. Your kid goes to a bank, gets a loan to build a construction loan to build a house, collateralized on the land, and that's it. They're homeowners. They have a future. You have a future because you still have home ownership, right? That's really important for the family, the boomer family as well. And so again, what I think one of the panelists mentioned, there's just, right now, we literally have just two types of housing. You have a single family home and then you have apartments and nothing in between. That doesn't make sense. Again, let's just offer the other alternative. Maybe people don't take it, but let's just see. Let's see, again, what young people are interested in.
Stephen, your idea sort of overlaps with Ricardo's as well. Can you explain a little bit how your solution, if implemented, how would it factor in these minimum lot sizes?
Well, that would be one of the three housing types that I would propose we need, is this in-between for sale, lower cost product. One being row homes, townhomes, which are a form of shared ownership. And then where it differs really is that I'm also suggesting the condominiums, which could be multi-story, high-density buildings, would also be included within my solution. So there's a great overlap, but clearly the row home solution is one that especially works in areas that are currently single-family homes with large enough lots that you can stack 6 units side by side from front to back. That's a large part of what could be done, and I believe the market would support that naturally because the building cost is low enough, the land cost would be relatively low. There would be a natural, quote-unquote, marketplace for that without subsidy. It would also give us the opportunity when it comes to the kinds of home ownership assistance we do right now. We're doing down payment assistance, which is only choosing a winner from the competitors for a property. It is not increasing the supply in any meaningful way. We need to actually provide more opportunities, and I do believe that what Ricardo is suggesting provides probably the lowest cost housing in the region, especially in the neighborhoods right now that are all single family.
Sean, I want to get your take on this idea. Two of the panelists are talking about lot sizes, subdividing land. What's your take on it? And do you see any obstacles that could arise from that?
Yeah, I think we need many solutions. So I think that reducing minimum lot sizes is something that is a solution that will help the existing shortfall of housing. My question about it, and I would love Ricardo to respond to this because I just haven't been able to figure it out, is who comes in, if you have a 5,000 square foot lot that you own, a regular family, I think, the regular homeowner is not going to be able to say, okay, I'm going to move out for a year and hire a contractor and hire an architect and hire a civil engineer and process plans and do a 5-unit subdivision. I think that ends up being something that we see elsewhere, which is a developer comes in, takes it out, buys it, puts 5 homes on it. So, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. I'm a community entrepreneur, as I like to say, developer. But I do think that there becomes a concern on the side of neighbors and of homeowners if that happens. So I do believe that I don't know how to respond to that. Smaller lot sizes is a good step. It is absolutely necessary, I believe.
So, it's interesting, Seattle's doing this, and the American Enterprise Institute did a study just recently on Seattle, and they found everything that we're talking about here. But what they also found, too, is that the developers that are doing this are small local developers. And so that's exactly right. You're going to probably provide opportunity for other local developers to buy a single-family lot and to replace that single-family lot. If you want to go through that as a homeowner, you can. It's just an option. You don't have to. There's a YouTube video that I saw of a family, a boomer family outside of Vancouver, and they actually went to their neighbors and they said, hey, we're going to be doing this, and they actually did exactly the same thing, and they created a compound for their children, their grandchildren, and the great-grandmother. And so, again, you can do it if you want to do it, but you don't have to do it, right? It's just, again, the idea just being that we have to have options, and the majority of our land is for one thing. And we've got to really think about what we can do with that land going forward. And people say to me, will it change the neighborhood? Sure, but I'm not the same as I was when I was born, and I'm not going to be the same as I am now as I will be in 30 years. Right? Things change. That's just the nature of life. And ultimately, too, I think what's interesting about this conversation is that we have a giant population of boomers, right? The largest population we have in our country at some point. We have me, the Gen Xers, a small little generation. And then we have millennials and Gen Z, another huge group of people. And that's really what we're talking about here, is them. Because, believe it or not, I want to retire, right? But who is going to pay those bills for me to retire? If Gen X can't find a home, if they can't start families, if they can't consume, if they can't go in debt, who's going to do it? This is very similar to the play we did in the 1950s when, if you remember, my grandfather and many people here, their parents were paying 90% taxes probably to do what? To build the aqueduct, the school system, all that stuff, the roads, right? That's the play we have to do here today. We have to figure out how to get these young people home ownership, they can start families, free education, and we need to do it quickly because we know what happened when we did the GI Bill in this country. It didn't go equally to people, of course, but we are still living off of that sugar high of the GI Bill. Home ownership, a free education. We're living off of that. We need to provide that to another generation.
Sean, I want to go to you. Your solution involves the state making this big declaration. We see today that there's a lot of local governments and city leaders who aren't fond of the state's laws and mandates that encourage more development. So what do you expect could be the response to something like this, and how would you suggest mitigating that?
Yeah, I think what the idea is that general plans and zoning have been adopted at the local level. And so whether or not, and a lot of what the state has done has tried to, in some ways, I don't want to say usurp that, because a lot of the most state laws haven't allowed significantly more development necessarily. But you still have local control in so much as the city or the county has said, this is what we want to see built in our jurisdiction. This is the zoning that we've put in place in our jurisdiction. The problem and the challenge that we have is once that happens, that should be the ball game. We should then be able to say, okay, this is my piece of property, this is what my land use is, and this is what my zoning designation is. As long as I'm consistent with that, that's what we're planning for. That's what the city has told the utility districts to provide for. That's what the school district bases their school facilities needs based on. But then we go through another rung of review and analysis, and that delay, especially on the for sale side, because when you have a for sale project, you are subject to CEQA, you are subject to discretion, someone can say no. That causes significant delay, that causes significant financing hardships, And that causes developers and home builders to say, no, I'm not going to do it. It's not worth it. So I think you can say to the jurisdictions, you've already approved this. This isn't changing anything about your general plan or your community plans. It's just giving us the certainty and the mechanism to go through it and say, okay, you've planned for it. Now we're going to build it.
Another question for you, Sean. There's, people worry all the time about big investors coming in from out of town, buying, and creating these big developments. How would you ensure that that wouldn't just, run rampant? How would you ensure that people who actually need housing and need to afford housing would get that housing?
So my solution, I think, focuses on the supply side in so much that it provides for more opportunity for more property, because it's not saying this specific type, even though, granted, 81% is almost all property in San Diego, it is saying that we're trying to level out the playing field amongst any piece of property in San Diego. And I think if you polled us, one of the three things we'd all agree on is the biggest obstacle is the availability of land, because what programs like Complete Communities does is it allocates winners whose values go tremendously through the roof. And then as a result of that, okay, you have a property that's in an SDA or a TPA, all of a sudden we're gonna pay way more for that property. And we're gonna build the most we can build on it, which is what we all, I think, would agree would happen. And that results in the highest cost to the market, right? High land costs, high construction costs, you need high rents. If you are able to spread out more land to be available, you reduce the constraint on land supply, and that's where we all come back to at the start of the day is what are we going to build on? And so I think what it would do is, yes, you're going to have out-of-town institutional capital, but every project does. Even small developers have to go to a bank and get a loan, and most of those banks are big out-of-town investors. But it allows for a wider diversity of product to be built, and once we start seeing significant supply, and we're not talking about 200 units at a time or 500 units at a time. We're talking about things like in Otay Ranch in Chula Vista, where we've seen almost 40,000 homes built, and we have lower housing costs down there because you have more supply. You spread that out over the entire region, and prices will start to have less tendencies to go up. You will start to level out pricing countywide at more affordable levels, attainable levels.
Ricardo, how would you foresee and respond to possible pushback to your plan? Obviously, smaller lot sizes would significantly change neighborhoods, and that's something that a lot of community members are concerned about throughout the region. So what would your response be to that?
I mean, my response is, well, what's your solution then, right? Because there's really not a lot of solutions we have here. I mean, you can either take a single family, land is single family, right? So that's the land. Well, what would you do? Would you build a tower? I don't want a tower. Okay. Then a townhome? Well, okay, I guess. That's gentle density. There really is very little solutions here, right? And if you want to keep the character, this is probably the only way you're going to do it in a gentle way, right? And it may be that in 100 years from now, we have to go even higher, but we won't have to worry about that in this room, right? But I think that's the real challenge here is that when you say, because I talked about this for a little while now, some people like it, some people don't, whatever. But then you're saying to them, well, what's your solution? What do you want to do? Because, people don't, the American dream, right or wrong, isn't condo rights in Southern California, right? It's a home and I can see the land, right? I want a single family home. It just so happens you can't afford it potentially in this market, and that's fine. You could go other place and find it, right? So, it's again, we've boxed ourselves into this situation, but it's ironic to me that the solution is actually pretty simple, and we're gonna do this eventually because it's just unsustainable, right? Regardless of what you think of the idea, do we really think millennials and Gen Zers are gonna be buying your $2 million home at some point? No. Maybe they'll get it when you pass on, but they're not gonna buy it. So at some point, you're just not gonna have people affording the product. It's just, that's the reality. Or I have a colleague in Detroit who has LISC Detroit, and the value of land in Detroit is so little, or has such less value, that a bank in some areas of Detroit will not give you a mortgage. Think about that. So the home's maybe worth $20,000. The bank's telling you, just go out there and get the money. We're not going to give you a mortgage for $20,000. And who would have thought in Detroit in the 1950s or the 40s that, oh yeah, people are going to leave here in the future and your land's going to be worth nothing practically? They never would have thought that. So we play with fire here in San Diego. We all say, oh, you'll never leave San Diego. It's beautiful, the ocean. Oh no. People like living. People want to have families. You'll leave. And once you leave, then what do? Right? We've got to get ahead of this, and it's really, really not that complicated. Is it a change in imagination of what a neighborhood looks like? Sure. But can you create a neighborhood? I live in Kensington. Maybe they all look like Spanish-style homes like I showed you. Who knows, right? Character is not the people, right? Character, if you want to replicate what it looks like, you can do that. That's not complicated. Ginger can build something that you want in your style, right? I mean, the Matterhorn doesn't exist in Orange County, but it's in Disneyland, right? And they built that. So we can build that character.
Thank you. Sean, can you expand? I think you mentioned this in your presentation, but with, one of the concerns that people have with building and new homes and new development is the strain that it can put on infrastructure. With a statewide emergency and quick building, how would you respond to that concern of this is just going to put a lot of strain on infrastructure?
Absolutely. So when a jurisdiction adopts its general plan, that goes to SANDAG, and SANDAG then projects out forward based on those general plans. But also it coordinates with the utility district. So whether it's the city's water department or Liebenhain's water district or a sewer district, those all should be integrated in a way that they're planning for build out of a general plan. And then every 5 years, water districts go through, they do urban water management plans, they do sewer system management plans. So every 5 years, these plans are being updated already as it exists today in anticipation of build out of the general plan. So while there will be concern and there will be frustration, there will be pushback, most of what is planned for by lead agencies today, whether they be cities or counties, is already anticipated in future plans for the utility districts. In fact, there's instances where some utility districts have gone, and this is I think they're talking about this on the water issue. Some districts have gone ahead and said, okay, we're going to have more growth, so we're going to go ahead and get ahead of this. Valley Center, a municipal water district, did this. They put a big effort in Valley Center because the County of San Diego put additional density out in Valley Center. The first project that came in Valley Center, Park Circle, which is a beautiful project, had development rights of up to 1,200 units in it. And then they have the North Village project, which has 700 units, and they have other projects. So they expect thousands of new units in Valley Center. And the water district said, okay, we're gonna do a bond, we're gonna put in this big improvement to ensure water supply and sewer capacity. And now there's no development happening. The Park Center project ended up being about 360 homes. And so now the district is in trouble. Allowing for more development that is planned for would enable more property taxes to be collected, more consumers. When we come in and we pay water $15,000, $16,000 a home for water rights, $20,000 a home for sewer rights. That all goes into these utility districts. We pay school fees, we pay park fees, we pay road fees. So all these improvements, some of them will be funded, but most of them are already planned for.
Stephen, with your idea to reform construction defect litigation, how would you respond to people who may say these are, the need to update and evaluate properties and developments are necessary guardrails? How would you respond to that, and why do you think it needs to be reformed?
So the why is because it is preventing us from building condos. And I want to call out the Aaron Price fellows we have here today. How many do we have? Okay. Very good. Were you all subjected to my rant earlier this morning? Did you? The different class? Okay, different cohort. So I spent the morning with the current cohort of Aaron Price fellows, and I think it's important to call them out because these are the leaders. These are the folks we need to stay in this region if we're going to be a prosperous region. At the same time, we have 10,000 people every day are turning 65 in the U.S. 10,000 every day for the next 19 years. right? That's a lot of seniors. These are a lot of seniors who don't want to live in a two-story home. They don't want a row home where they're going up and down the stairs. They've got oversized houses. They can't move out because of their tax basis, and there isn't a product out there that fulfills their need. Condominiums, multi-story elevator condominiums, are exactly the product that many, not all, of these folks really want. So it's an imperative that we build these. That's the starting point. The interests who are interested in keeping the 10-year, the very onerous regulations right now, I would say there's a couple. One is labor has often wanted to use this issue as leverage to get into the housing market more of the private housing market, on arguments that the quality of building would be, building standards would be improved by the apprenticeship and training and all the things that they do to be expert builders, right? So there's an interest there. The stronger one is the realtors, because they sell confidence. They sell confidence in the future value of a home. They need people to believe that what they're buying, what they're being sold is valuable. I do think that's overcoming that is relatively easy. I sit in a room. Any realtors here in the room? That's weird to be in San Diego and with like 2 realtors. Okay, well, one with a heart too. I love that. I've sat in rooms of realtors and said, how many of you do deals that are under $1 million? That's your bread and butter. And almost the whole room raises their hands, right? And then you say, how many of you do like $2 million plus deals? And it's a smaller number of hands. And I turned around and I said to the $1 million folks, I said, you're out of business here fairly soon. There's no new product for you to sell. You're simply shifting around the same ownership units unless we come in with a substantial number. So I believe that ultimately the realtors are going to come around to being supportive of construction defect litigation. And I think in the long term, labor wants housing too. They don't just want jobs. There's a lot of labor that wants housing. The service industry workers, UDW and others, who need housing for their members, for the families, for the community. So I think that the depth and severity of the problem is ultimately going to bring these folks around, but it takes honest dealing, honest questions, honest answers for us to get there.
Thank you. We are going to move to the question and answer part of our program, but first we're going to take a question from a Prize Fellow.
Yeah, so our first question is going to be from Marilyn Daniel, a Prize Fellow.
Hi everyone, I'm Marilyn Daniel. I'm a sophomore at San Diego High School and an Aaron Prize Fellow. My question is, what strategies have you seen work best in other cities and states that could help us increase housing here in San Diego?
Well, so I will start with the affordable side, because I think if you look at what they're doing in the Bay Area and in Los Angeles, where they've created very massive amounts of capital through bonds, through new taxes, to create more affordable housing. That's an example of where the affordable side has been successful. You'd have to go to Texas and the really liberal zoning, you can even call it zoning there. The Z word is not spoken. Where they've actually been able to sprawl endlessly to fulfill their need. Any property can be used for whatever makes market sense, which means you have much more fluidity. Here, because we have the rigidity of single-family, commercial, mixed use, et cetera, the capacity can't shift when the need shifts. They can't simply build something different to meet current market demand as easily. Texas, in particular, Dallas is, I think, maybe the poster child, or Houston. Houston is your favorite? Yeah.
Industrial next to a school, next to a hospital, next to a...
Exactly. So that's successful from the standpoint of providing enough housing, but is it really what we want? Phoenix is an example of a city that has actually provided adequate housing and keeps it relatively affordable at the cost of sprawling endlessly over a desert in an environment that is lethal, right? Without the air conditioning. So we are blessed with being a permanently, we've been described a number of times in the press recently as the Goldilocks zone during the climate crisis. We're actually a place where international capital, people are buying homes here because it is seen as a haven against a warming planet, right? So we're dealing with this different set of constraints here. The geography, the mountains are an absolute limit, right? The border's an absolute limit, the ocean's an absolute limit. Some of the backcountry, yes, we could get more housing out of it, but I'll go back to, do you want 5 Mira Mesas plopped down in the backcountry of our county? So there are successes. You'd have to go to Vienna. You have to go to Europe, really, to see something where they've been making investments since the end of World War I. So what is the secret? Everyone hears about social housing, the Vienna model. Okay, if we were to put $1 billion a year worth of housing money out there every year since 1918, we would be in the same place as Vienna. Have we done that? Not even. Not even. I don't know if we've done $1 billion in our history of affordable housing dollars. So I'll stop there.
Really appreciate the question. One of the things that I've seen locally is the intentional use of housing element law to allow for properties in some jurisdictions, particularly Encinitas, to get past the hurdle of lack of housing. So Encinitas had a housing element that was far to compliance with the state. After two failed efforts at the ballot, a judge ordered the housing element to be adopted, and every project, I think, that was on that housing element has now moved forward. So it's worked. It hasn't provided, all those units are not affordable housing. Most were done with density bonus, so they built more housing than what the housing element actually anticipated, but only at 20%, I think, of most of those projects are affordable housing. But housing element state law has worked, but it's only working on the rental side because the discretionary side for sale, so the condominiums, the townhomes, those still require a discretionary vote, and they can be denied for non-objective reasons. They can be denied for any reason whatsoever. So that would be another change to state housing law.
So, good question. It's interesting that we have so much single-family zoning around the whole country, and we have very, very, very few jurisdictions or who have done what I was explaining to you to do, right? It's really kind of strange. And when you talk to developers and land use people and bankers, and you explain to them, this is a way to make housing cheaper, they just look at you like, yeah, duh, of course, what? So is there just a giant disconnect from the idea and the actual change that we're trying to make? And frankly, it's, I think, a lack of imagination, to be honest with you. It's just a real lack of imagination. So the cities that have done this, and there are some, Houston was brought up. Houston did this in 1994 or 5 as a vote of the people. And they've seen exactly what I said. They're seeing lower housing costs. They're seeing more opportunity for young families to live there. It's happening. Seattle has done it, like I mentioned, not everywhere, but they've done it and they've seen the same thing. Portland, the same thing too. The real fascinating thing is in each of these jurisdictions, because I've reached out to them, they've not really talked about the part of the property taxes and the increase in property tax. Now, again, we have a very unique system here in California, but they haven't put the two together. And that's the second part of this. We are very good in our society of doing a lot of things, but we're siloed. We're siloed. And so the planner doesn't really think about the property taxes. The people that worry about taxes don't think about the planner. The people that are worried about VMT don't think about the zoning. We're just kind of all talking past each other. And again, I worked in government. I worked for elected officials. I was a chief of staff. If you had come to the office and you had asked me why we have single-family zoning, I would have said, I don't know. If you would have said, how big is single-family zoning in the city? I don't know. If you would have said, could you build on less land? I would have said, I don't know. And that's the job of a local government person, is to understand what zoning does to their cities. And I bet you, and I don't want to call them out, but I bet you they don't understand it. They don't understand it. And that's okay because we're a community, right? We can help them understand it. And also the challenge is when you go speak to elected officials, there's a need for the elected official to say, I know what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about, Sean. No, I don't need an education. I've got this job. I'm a leader. But the reality is they don't. They don't. And how do I know? Because I talk to them. And I'm a safe space because I can look across from them and say, I worked in this office. I'm just this ignorant of this idea too. And I learned this because my new job forces me to work with smart people like Ginger and others. And if you ask them these questions, if I allow you to buy less land and build a townhome, will it be cheaper than the 5,000 square foot land with a home on top of it? And they'll look at you like, son, it's not all working up there. Of course it's cheaper, it's less land, right? So it's shocking, but you've got a lot of people older than you who lack imagination. That's the truth. What else can we say? We're all indicted.
Thank you all, and thank you for the question. All right, we have a few here that people have submitted. So one that has gotten a lot of votes. It seems like these 3 plans are compatible with each other. Does anyone on the panel disagree with any specifics of the other's plans?
I'll start off, absolutely not. Absolutely not, right? Because again, we're in a housing crisis. So each of these panelists have an idea to do something. I like to think my idea is at the base of it all because the land is the commodity that you live on. And if you can't use smaller amounts of it by law, no less, then that's a problem, right?
I would agree. I think I mentioned this, but the issue is so great. The shortfall, not just in San Diego, but across California, is so significant that we need to do everything that we can in our power to build as many homes as we can as quickly as possible. California is a major economic engine for the country, for the world. The reality is we are an environmentally progressive state. We are very much the forefront of trying to address climate change and trying to preserve habitat and trying to keep water quality clean so that our oceans are clean. And every time that a project fails and every house that isn't built is a family that leaves San Diego and a family that leaves California. And to Ricardo's comment about Detroit, San Diego and Detroit are very different, but we have seen an exodus from San Diego. We did see a reduction in population during COVID, and we lost 2 seats congressionally in the last census. And if we want to have real power and real change, a lot of the issues that we so care about are decisions that are made in Washington. And if we are going to live in an era where Congress is divided by 2 or 3 votes, we need as many of those votes as possible to be from California.
So the question is really, do these overlap? Are they at odds with each other? And we're in an age of improv, right? And the basic rule of improv is yes and. So I think we need all of these things. I do think my idea is more clear than the others, but and I'm asking for the youth vote here. I just talked to your classmates, Aaron Price Fellows, early this morning. Just saying. But in all seriousness, we do need all of these solutions. I don't fundamentally disagree with any of them. I think, some of them take multiple years to enact. Other things we can do more quickly. Let's do them all.
All right, we have another question here. It says, the major job centers of Kearney Mesa and Sorrento Valley are zoned exclusively commercial. How can we build more housing in there so people can live close to work?
So first of all, question the premise. I'll question the premise a little bit because the latest community plan for Kearney Mesa did actually rezone a lot of industrial land and commercial land. Yes, that deserves a big applause. You're seeing apartments go up now. You're seeing a vital restaurant and cultural district that's there that is squeezing into space that was never intended to be used in the way it's being used. It's bursting at the seams, has economic opportunity. The place just money running in the gutters practically when I walk through. I'm an economic development guy. I look at it's just because people are spending, and they're on sidewalks, money in the gutter, sidewalks 3 foot wide with parties of 10 and 12, food shopping and cultural engagement, all this. So we need to rebuild housing in areas like that where we've already got these vital hearts. We need to support it with housing because that's what will keep it a 24-hour city. That's what's going to make the transit system should be one leg of a transit, of transportation. That area is in the center of the region, right? So we are doing, I guess to go back to the question, I think we are doing the rezonings that are necessary wherever it is wise and advisable. Kearney Mesa has issues with the flight path of Montgomery Field. There's co-location. There's certainly some concerns, and I know in the past when we talked about industrial lands, there's certain uses that light industrial that are fundamentally incompatible. So if they're using solvents and other kinds of environmental, we don't want to recreate Barrio Logan. We need to untangle Barrio Logan and make that a pure, safe, clean place to live again. So I think it's the short answer is it's very nuanced here. But yes, we are, I think, as a city, looking at every opportunity to use land in the most appropriate way.
I would agree. I mean, I'm not an industrial guy, but I think that what I've understood from kind of industrial and retail markets and areas that are, like Kearney Mesa, like Sorrento Valley, is that the space needed per employee has significantly reduced as we've become more efficient at operating, as we have work from home and telecommuting and stuff. So as the balance shifts towards more employees in a smaller space, we still need employment lands, because if we don't have the jobs, then it doesn't matter. A house is just a house is a place for a job to go to bed at night. We need to keep the jobs, but we've seen a reduction in the amount of space needed for those jobs, and that's where we convert it to housing, again, with considerations like Montgomery Field or MCS Miramar, but I think it's going to happen and continue to happen.
Yeah, I was just going to add yes to all what they said, but to me the shocking thing about that area is, I'm 48, I've lived in San Diego my whole life, but there was a point where you just went up there for look at cars, right? I mean, there wasn't really much going on over there. And now it's so vibrant and there's so much going on. And I look at North Park too. There was a point where North Park was kind of like, oh my goodness, what's going on? And now it's so vibrant. But guess what's making it vibrant? They are. Young people are. Not me. My generation's raised kids. My parents' generation is retired. They don't have a lot of disposable income. It's them. They're revitalizing areas that everybody here in San Diego knows. At one point, we looked around and go, what is going on here? What's happened to North Park? Now look at this place. So again, the goal here is to accommodate for that. Accommodate for them. So that we can do things like build housing where people want to go. And the other thing is, this is the important thing about the concept of minimum lot sizes is to pull the thread everywhere. Because we also have to be humble to not understand where people are going to find value for their families, right? I live in Kensington. I think it's a great neighborhood, but people may say, I don't want to live in Kensington. It's too far from this, too far from that. People may say, I don't want to live in Point Loma. Okay, but I do want to live in Claremont, or I do want to live here. And then when they start to fill that in, lo and behold, when our government says to us, hey, guess what? We need to tax ourselves because we need a better transit system. We can now say, well, the transit system should go here, it should go there, because that's where people want to live, right? So we've got to be humble to not know where people like her are going to want to live. You've got to let her fill it in.
Thank you. Stephen, someone asked, what is the political bloc right now to reforming the defect litigation issue? Like, what is standing in the way right now?
Wow. Well, we can talk about who needs to be there. We do need the realtors there. They need to see that there's they need to be there. We need to have serious conversations with labor about what this ongoing crisis means, because the housing crisis, if we decline as an economy, that is fewer jobs across the board. Right? We need to be able to, so I think we need to bring them on board. Beyond that, I don't know that there are any really organized blocks, but that has been a challenge. I think every year the legislature has brought forward something around construction defect litigation, and one year there was a slight improvement, but I think by and large this has been kind of a frozen issue. And so we need, I think what we really need is for voters to understand why it even matters to you, because if you're living in your house, you may be quite happy. Construction defect litigation may sound so abstract that why would you care? But it fundamentally puts pressure on housing, pushes the prices up, creates fewer opportunities for our kids to live here, to stay here, to thrive here. We have interns, by the way, in my office almost all the time. We have a couple of interns. Most of them leave the region after they finish their education here at this point. And part of it is because they get exposed to housing and the market through their work at the Federation. They understand it all too deeply. We can't fool them into saying, oh, don't worry, you'll find a place here. I don't know if we will. We need the electorate, I think, more than anybody else. And if we can't get this through the legislature, then maybe we need some kind of an initiative that will make this happen, because that is why the initiative process exists, right? For us to take the power into our own hands.
We have a couple questions about, corporations owning developments and coming in and, building these homes and driving up the prices. So one person asked, is there a way to cap how many corporations can come in and do this? Is that a question y'all can answer?
I can jump at it. So what Seattle has seen with minimum lot size reform and building row homes, townhomes, is that it's not the big builders coming in. It's the smaller developers. And it makes sense, right? LISC is a bank. I get money from banks to provide as pre-development to affordable housing developers. It costs me the same amount of money to lend someone $5,000 as it does $5 million. Right? These large corporations, they have a model of business that's like Costco, bulk, big. They're not going to buy one home, two homes. They're just not structured like that. Maybe at some point they will, but what's going to happen is you're going to see smaller folks do this work. Your neighbors who are in construction, or other folks, maybe people in labor who say, hey, I want to start my own firm, my own construction firm. Great. So it's not, the play is not going to bring them in as soon. And the other thing is, remember what these large corporations are saying most of the time, like a Blackstone or whatnot, BlackRock. What they're saying to their shareholders is, we are buying single-family zoned homes because why? We don't think the zoning is going to ever change. We don't think these people will get their act together. Therefore, we're buying something with a lot of certainty, folks, right? So they're literally betting that a place like San Diego will never, ever, ever figure this out. Let's prove them wrong. Let's prove them wrong.
Yeah, I guess I want to speak to why do we not want corporations in here? Because that's the question, right? So what do we not want about their capital? I'm actually more comfortable with them coming in making one-time monies, building and selling condos, as long as then the subsequent owners build up the equity. When large corporations own rental properties, and we know rents are incredibly high, people are paying 50% of their income on rent. If they're skimming 50% of their income off and pushing it into shareholders in New York, which is the way we like to talk about shareholders here in San Diego, we're pushing money out of the region. We're basically creaming everybody's paychecks to put money into for shareholders elsewhere. That's more concerning to me than it is the one-time profit from making and selling a building. That one time you're going to sell it, yes, but then the people who live there are going to, instead of paying rent, they're going to be putting money into their own equity. And it's going to stabilize, it's going to keep, as a region, more of our wealth here. That is going to be good for all of us.
I think we've created the opportunity for Blackstone, whoever you wanted to put a name here. We've created this opportunity by not building enough housing. And what happened in the Great Recession was we saw house prices plummet 40 to 50%. Well, guess what? Those homes are worth 200 to 300 times more than they were. And New York figured that out. Wall Street figured that out. And they said, well, shoot, if the greatest financial crisis in modern history, right, still hasn't had a negative effect on these assets, what will? So the problem, what they've realized is what has been clear is that because the supply is so constrained, because that graph gets bigger, we are not building enough housing. That is only going to continue to push prices up for the foreseeable future. And so we need to figure out a way to level that playing field, and the solution is more supply. Because once there's more supply and there's more opportunities for renters and buyers to buy something else and not be forced into competing over the same one available unit. I mean, realtors, right? How many offers do you get on a house when it gets listed at a fair market price? Our neighbor's a realtor. She says she'll get between 20 to 30, maybe 40 offers at or above list price on every single new listing. Yeah, and that's just the reality because supply is so constrained. And hedge funds know this, and private equity knows this, and they have the ability to do it and to overpay because it's just going to continue to appreciate as long as we constrain supply artificially. We have the units planned. We're just not getting it approved fast enough. And I think what, again, we might all agree upon, and I heard you say it for sure, is ministerially approved. Guarantee in the process that when someone wants to come and make an investment, that they aren't going to be told no, that they're going to be able to do it, and then they can line up their own equity, their own capital, and build it on an understandable and appreciable schedule, and they know the outcome. And once you know the outcome, your underwriting changes significantly, you can pay less money, you can change your product type, it's a huge difference. But until that happens, I'm sorry, but we're not going to see Blackstone LLC 1 will then just say, okay, well, I own 5, but I'm going to create Blackstone LLC 2 and 3 and 4, and they're all going to own 5 properties. And it's a pain in the butt for them, but that's the reality.
All right, thank you all. We're going to start wrapping it up. This was a great discussion. We'll hear from Bella to give us the closing remarks.
Thank you, everybody. Now would be the time to vote if you haven't already. It seems like a lot of you have, but we very much appreciate that. The voting will be open for, I believe, about 10 minutes after the panel, so you have some time to think about it. And all of the winners of all of today's panels will be announced and awarded at the podcast recording later this evening. So if you're having any trouble with voting or questions or otherwise, raise your hand. Somebody can come around and help you out. But until then, the next session is at 2:30. So thank you so much for joining us.
Let's give them a round of applause.
A round of applause.